The stench hit me first. A mixture of sweat, rot, filthy straw, and something else, something I couldn't name. Despair, perhaps. Fear so thick in the air you could taste it. I should never have come here. The Market of the Damned lay at the southern edge of the city, where the cobblestone streets dissolved into mud and the king's laws faded to whispers. Here, everything was traded that people refused to name aloud. Stolen goods, forbidden artifacts, living things. I was only here because my usual route home had been blocked by a landslide. A detour, the guards had said. Just a small detour. But this detour led me directly past the market. And though I kept my eyes on the ground and pulled my worn cloak tighter around myself, I couldn't ignore the sounds. The weeping, the pleading, the laughter of buyers. I walked faster. My thin boots splashed through puddles whose contents I preferred not to identify. Just a few hundred more steps, and I'd be through. Then I could return to my tiny room above the tailor's shop, bolt the door, and pretend this place didn't exist. But then I heard it. A roar, deep, guttural, full of rage and pain at once. It cut through the market's noise like a blade and froze me mid-step. That was not a human sound. That was something wild, something ancient. A sound that made my bones vibrate and my heart stumble. My feet moved on their own. Against all reason, I turned and followed the sound. I pushed through the crowd, merchants loudly hawking their wares, buyers haggling over the value of human lives with indifferent expressions. No one noticed me. I was just another poor seamstress in a threadbare dress, invisible in this world of wealth and corruption. But then I saw him. The crowd parted before a large, rusted cage mounted on a wooden cart. The cage was small, far too small for the creature inside. And the creature, merciful heaven. It was a wolf, but no ordinary wolf. He was massive, larger than any animal I'd ever seen. His shoulders reached the height of a man, even crouched as he was. His fur was midnight black, matted in places with dried blood and filth. Wounds covered his body everywhere, fresh whip marks, deep cuts, brand marks burned into his flesh like cruel runes. But it was his eyes that held me. They glowed an impossible gold, even in the dim light of the overcast afternoon. And they were not the eyes of an animal. There was intelligence there, fury, pride, and a sadness so deep and bottomless that it stole my breath. Around his neck lay a heavy iron chain, thick as my wrist. The chain was fastened to the cage floor, giving him barely enough slack to lift his head. His muzzle was enclosed by an iron muzzle that fit so tightly I could see the metal cutting into his skin. Blood dripped slowly from his jaw, pooling beneath him in a dark puddle. My stomach cramped. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice tore me from my paralysis. He was a fat man with an oily smile and eyes as lifeless as a corpse's. He stood beside the cage and clapped his hands to gain the crowd's attention. "We now come to today's main attraction, a true specimen of magnificence." He struck the bars with his stick. The wolf didn't even flinch. He just kept staring straight ahead, as if the man didn't exist. "This killer," the auctioneer continued, his voice dripping with feigned enthusiasm, "was captured in the Shadow Forest. It took 7 men to subdue him. 3 of them didn't survive." The crowd murmured excitedly. Some laughed. "Perfect for the arena! Perfect for the fighting pits! Imagine this beast tearing your enemies to pieces." The auctioneer grinned. "Starting bid is 100 gold coins." 100 gold coins. That was more than I earned in 5 years. 110, someone called from the crowd, a wealthy merchant, judging by his robes. 150, another. I should leave. This wasn't my world. I had no gold. I barely had enough to pay my rent and feed myself. And yet... The wolf moved slightly. His head turned, and suddenly his eyes met mine. The world around me blurred. In that moment, I saw everything. I saw the pride of a king, broken and humiliated. I saw the loneliness of a soul that had lost all hope. I saw myself, trapped, alone, waiting for someone, anyone, to see me as more than just a tool, an object, a commodity. My hand reached into my pocket. The small leather purse felt heavy. This was everything I owned. My entire savings. For years I had set aside every copper penny, hidden every silver piece. It was supposed to buy my freedom. A small cottage in the countryside, far from the city, from the filthy streets and greedy eyes. A place where I could finally belong to myself. 200, the merchant bellowed. 250, his rival countered. The wolf didn't look away from me. It was as if he were looking into my soul, asking me, "Will you look away like everyone else?" My fingers tightened around the purse. I couldn't look away. 300. My voice was quiet, but in the sudden silence that followed, everyone heard it. All heads turned toward me. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. The merchant laughed loudly. "Did the little mouse just bid?" he mocked. "Show your gold, girl, or disappear." Heat rose to my face, but I forced myself to stand upright. With trembling hands, I raised my purse and poured its contents into my palm. Gold coins. Not many, but enough. Enough to represent the last 10 years of my life. The auctioneer stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. He grabbed a coin, bit it, tested it. Then he nodded slowly. 300 gold coins from the young lady, he announced with a surprised grin. Any further bids? The merchant studied me with narrowed eyes. Then he shrugged. Not for a mangled mutt. Let her have him. The other bidders murmured in agreement. They were already losing interest. Sold! The auctioneer struck the cage with his stick. 2. The lady in gray. I stood there, my empty purse still in hand, unable to believe what I'd just done. What had I done? The auctioneer waved me over. Come, come, little one. Your beast awaits. On unsteady legs, I stepped closer to the cage. The wolf hadn't taken his eyes off me the entire time. Now, up close, he was even more imposing and terrifying. His teeth, visible even behind the muzzle, were long as daggers. His claws scraped across the metal floor as he moved slightly. Here. The auctioneer pressed a heavy key into my hand. This is for the cage lock, and here, a second, smaller key for the chain. I'd leave the muzzle on if I were you, or he'll tear your head off. He laughed as if it were a joke. Want help with transport? He asked. For 10 silver pieces, I'll send a man with you. I shook my head. I had no silver left. I had nothing left at all. Your decision. He shrugged and turned to the next cage. I stood alone before the wolf. The crowd had already dispersed, searching for the next cruel entertainment. Slowly, very slowly, I knelt before the cage. The wolf growled, a deep, warning rumble that made my ribs vibrate. I know, I whispered. I know you're afraid. I am, too. I extended my hand, not to touch him, but to show him it was empty. No weapon, no whip. I promise you, my voice broke. I won't hurt you. I only want to help. Please trust me. He stared at me. Long, so long that I thought he would ignore me. Then, almost imperceptibly, he inclined his head. Just a centimeter, but it was enough. With trembling hands, I pushed the key into the cage lock. The journey home, I will never forget. It was already dusk when I dragged the heavy cart with the cage through the streets. My arms burned, my shoulders ached, and I had to stop several times to catch my breath. The wolf was heavy, not just his weight, but the burden of his mere presence. Everywhere we passed, people stopped. Children hid behind their mothers. Men reached for their knives. An old woman spat in front of me and muttered something about demons and witchcraft. That's a monster, a merchant shouted, slamming his shop window shut. Why are you bringing such a thing into our city? I ignored them all. I focused only on putting one foot in front of the other. My room was on the top floor of a narrow, dilapidated building at the edge of the craftsman's quarter. There was no elevator, only a steep, narrow staircase. Impossible to bring the cart up. I stared at the cage. The wolf stared back. "I have to let you out," I said quietly. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "But if you run away, if you kill me, then everything was for nothing." He made no sound. His golden eyes revealed nothing. My hands trembled so badly I dropped the key twice before I got it into the lock. The metal clicked. The door swung open. The wolf didn't move. "Come," I whispered, backing away slowly. I gestured toward the building's entrance just a few meters away. "Please." For an endless moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, almost carefully, he moved. He was so large he had to duck to crawl out of the cage. When he stood fully outside, it took my breath away. He was gigantic. His shoulder reached my chest. Every muscle beneath his torn fur was defined, powerful, deadly. The chain around his neck rattled as he straightened, and I saw how he swayed under its weight. How long had he been wearing it? He looked toward the street. He could have fled. With his long legs, he'd be gone in seconds, and no one could stop him. But he didn't run. Instead, he turned to me, and again our eyes met. In his eyes lay a question, a challenge. "Up the stairs," I said, gesturing to the entrance. "My apartment. It's not much, but it's safe." He set himself in motion, not fast, not aggressive. He limped, dragging his left hind leg, and I saw fresh blood seeping through his fur. Every step seemed to pain him, but he made no sound. Pride, I thought. Even broken, he refused to show how much he suffered. The staircase was narrow, and he had to lie almost flat to climb it. I went ahead of him, lighting a candle to illuminate the way. At every creak of the old wooden steps, I held my breath, expecting him to turn on me. But he only followed me, step by step, until we finally reached my door. My chamber was tiny. A narrow bed, a rickety table, a fireplace that produced more smoke than warmth, a window through which cold night air whistled. It was barely big enough for me, and now I shared it with a creature half the size of a horse. "Welcome," I murmured, wishing I had something better to offer. He entered. His eyes wandered through the room, checking every corner, every possible threat. Then he sank to the floor with a heavy sigh. The chain clattered loudly on the wooden planks. I closed the door behind us and leaned against it. My whole body trembled. Adrenaline, exhaustion, pure fear. What had I done? I had spent my entire savings on a wolf who could kill me with one bite. I had brought him into my home, into the only place where I felt safe. The wolf watched me, waiting. "The muzzle," I said quietly. "I have to remove it. You can't breathe, not properly." He growled, this time louder, more threatening. "I know," I raised my hands. "I know you hate when people come too close, but please let me help you." I approached him slowly, inch by inch. My heart raced, my palms were slick with sweat. He could snap at any moment. Muzzle or not, his claws were more than enough to tear me apart. But he didn't. When I knelt before him, I could hear his breathing. Fast, shallow, painful. The metal of the muzzle had carved deep grooves into his snout. Pus and blood were crusted in the wounds. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, fighting the tears burning in my eyes. I reached for the buckle at the back of his head. My fingers touched his fur. It was rough and matted, but beneath it I felt warmth. Life. He froze. Every muscle in his body tensed. "I won't hurt you," I repeated softly, again and again like a prayer. "I won't hurt you. I promise." The buckle was old and rusty. I had to pull, scratch, fight. The wolf trembled beneath my hands, and I didn't know if it was from pain or suppressed rage. Then suddenly, the buckle gave way. The muzzle fell with a metallic clatter to the floor. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The wolf just sat there, his snout finally free, his teeth bared. He could have killed me. He could have torn out my throat before I could even scream. Instead, he lowered his head. His tongue darted out, licking the sore spots on his snout. Then he made a sound. Not a growl, but something else. A whimper, quiet, brief, but it was there. Relief. Gratitude. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Water," I croaked. "You need water." I stood, my legs weak, and fetched the only jug I owned. I filled it from the bucket by the window. The water was old and tasted of metal, but it was all I had. I set the jug before him. He hesitated, his eyes fixed on me suspiciously, as if expecting a trap. But then he lowered his head and drank, and drank, and drank. The jug was empty in seconds. I refilled it twice more before he finally stopped. When he was finished, he raised his head and looked at me. And this time, for the first time, there was no hatred in his eyes. Only confusion, as if he couldn't understand why I was doing this. I could barely understand it myself. "The chain," I said quietly. "I'll remove the chain too, but not tonight. Tonight I'm too tired, and you're too injured. Tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll do it. Okay?" He didn't answer. Of course not. But he nodded. I swear he nodded. I dragged myself to my bed and collapsed onto it, still fully dressed. Every bone in my body ached. My mind screamed at me that I was insane, that I was sleeping next to a monster. But when I closed my eyes, I heard him move, the rattle of the chain. Heavy paws on the floor. I didn't dare look. And then I felt it. Weight. Warmth. He had lain down beside my bed, not on it, but right next to it, as if protecting me. I opened my eyes a crack and saw him in the faint moonlight filtering through the window. His massive body was curled up, his snout resting on his paws, and his eyes, those impossible golden eyes, were fixed on the door. Watchful. Ready. I fell asleep with a smile on my lips. The first days were strange. I woke the next morning with stiff limbs and a dull headache. For a confused moment, I wondered why my chamber was so cold. Then I saw him. The wolf, still curled beside my bed, his flank rising and falling with the rhythm of his breathing. So it hadn't been a dream. I really had spent all my gold on a monster. Carefully, I swung my legs out of bed. The wolf immediately lifted his head. His eyes fixed on me sharply. I froze, my hands still on the mattress. "Good morning," I whispered. He didn't answer. Of course not. But he grumbled softly, a sound somewhere between warning and acknowledgement. I stood and stretched, every muscle protesting. Then I went to the fireplace and knelt before it. The ashes from last night were long cold. I had no wood left. I had no money to buy more. I had no money at all. Reality hit me like a blow. What was I supposed to do? I couldn't return to the tailor's shop. Mrs. Brennan would never believe I'd spent my savings on a wolf. She'd declare me insane and throw me out on the street. And the wolf, he needed food, medicine, care. I looked over at him. He was still watching me, his head tilted slightly as if reading my thoughts. "I'll find a way," I said, more to myself than to him. I always find a way. First, I had to tend to his wounds. I gathered what little I had, an old rag, some water, a small bottle of cheap herbal spirits I'd been saving to drink. "I have to clean your wounds," I explained, as I approached slowly. "It will hurt, but if I don't, they'll become infected." He growled. Of course he did. But he didn't bite when I knelt beside him. He didn't pull away when I carefully pressed the rag to one of the deep cuts on his flank. His whole body stiffened, and a soft whine escaped his throat, but he stayed still. "Brave," I murmured. "You're so brave." I worked slowly, methodically. Each wound was cleaned as best I could. The water in the jug turned pink, then red. When I came to the brand mark on his shoulder, a cruel rune I couldn't identify, His body tensed so much I thought he might shatter. "Almost done," I whispered. "Just a little more." And then, as I was about to pull the rag away, it happened. His snout moved. Slowly. Carefully. He touched my hand with his nose. Just a fleeting touch, barely more than a breath. My heart skipped a beat. I looked into his eyes, and what I saw there brought tears to my eyes. Not anger, not mistrust. Trust. He trusted me. "Thank you," I whispered, though I didn't know if he understood. "Thank you for giving me a chance." From that moment, something changed between us. He followed me everywhere. When I went down to the courtyard well, he waited at the top of the stairs. When I tried to leave the chamber to look for work, he blocked the door until I gave up and returned. It was as if he'd decided I belonged to him, and honestly, I didn't mind. But reality couldn't be ignored. On the third day, I had nothing left to eat. My stomach growled loudly, and I had to sit down because I felt dizzy. The wolf noticed. Of course he did. He stood, limped to the door, and scratched at it. "No," I said weakly. "You can't go out. People, they would kill you." He scratched more insistently. "Please." I tried to make my voice firm, but it broke. "Stay here. It's safer." He turned to me, and the expression in his eyes was reproachful, as if saying, "You're sacrificing yourself for me, and you think I don't notice?" I swallowed hard. "I'll find food. Tomorrow, I promise." But that was a lie, and we both knew it. Night fell. I wrapped myself in my thin blanket and tried to sleep, but hunger gnawed at me. My thoughts spun in circles. Maybe I could ask Mrs. Brennan for an advance. Maybe I could sell something. But what? I owned nothing of value. Suddenly I felt something warm against my back. The wolf. He had climbed onto the bed, the first time, and pressed his massive body against mine. His warmth penetrated the thin blanket, penetrated my bones. I heard the deep rumble in his chest. Not a growl, but a purr, deep and soothing. I turned carefully. His head lay on my pillow. His golden eyes were half closed. When he looked at me, he licked my hand once. And I understood. He was warming me. He was trying to comfort me. The tears came before I could stop them. I buried my face in his fur, and for the first time in days, I didn't cry from despair, but from relief, from gratitude. I wasn't alone. The next morning I found a dead rat outside my door. I stared at it, confused until I understood. The wolf. He had gone out during the night. How, I didn't know, and hunted for me. My stomach rebelled at the thought, but then I looked at him. He sat there, proud, expectant like a dog bringing his master a gift. "Thank you," I whispered, forcing myself to smile. "But I think I'll find something else." I sold my blanket to an old merchant for a few copper pieces. With it I bought bread and some meat. Not much, but enough for both of us. When I came home, I divided it fairly. He devoured his portion in seconds, then pushed his plate toward me. "No," I said firmly. "That's yours." He pushed it back again. We argued like this for 5 minutes until I finally gave up and took a small bite. Only then did he start eating again. It was absurd. It was wonderful. A week passed, then 2. The days merged into a routine. Every morning, I cleaned his wounds, which were slowly but steadily healing. Every evening we shared our meager meal. At night he slept on my bed, his body like a warm wall between me and the cold world outside. I gave him a name, Shadow, because his fur was as black as darkness, and because he had come from a darkness I couldn't even imagine. He seemed to like the name. Whenever I called him, he lifted his head, and his eyes glowed. I talked to him about everything, about my childhood in an orphanage, about the years of drudgery in the tailor's shop, about my dreams of a small garden where I could grow herbs. He always listened. Sometimes he laid his head on my knees, and I stroked his fur, until my fingers went numb. One evening, when the moon was full and bright through my window, I finally removed the chain. "It's time," I said quietly. "You're free, Shadow. You can go if you want." I opened the lock. The heavy chain fell to the floor with a loud clatter that echoed in the night's silence. The wolf stood. He shook himself, and I saw the relief run through his body. His neck was sore where the chain had chafed, but it would heal. He went to the door. My heart sank. Of course. Why would he stay? He was wild. He didn't belong here, locked in a tiny chamber with a penniless girl. But then he turned around. He came back, and he lay down in front of the door, not behind it. He blocked the exit, not to escape, but to protect me. "You fool," I whispered, wiping away my tears. "You wonderful, crazy fool." It happened in the 3rd week. I had just returned from an unsuccessful day at the market. No one wanted to hire a seamstress who kept a wolf at home. The rumor had spread quickly, and I felt the mood shift. Shadow was nervous. He paced in the chamber, his ears flat against his skull. He growled softly, looking at the door again and again. "What's wrong?" I asked, placing my hand on his head. "What do you smell?" He made no sound, but his eyes said, "Everything. Danger." I bolted the door, pushed the table in front of it. It wasn't much, but it was something. Night fell. I didn't light a candle. We sat in darkness, the wolf and I, waiting. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy boots on the wooden steps of the staircase. Several men, judging by their tread. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. A hard knock on the door made me flinch. "Open the door, girl!" A rough voice. I recognized it, the auctioneer from the market. "We know you're in there." I pressed myself against the wall. Shadow positioned himself in front of me, his lips pulling back to bare his teeth. "We just want the wolf," the voice continued. "We made a mistake selling him to you. Our client offers 1,000 gold coins for him. Hand him over, and we'll pay you. Let's say 100 as compensation." 100 gold coins. That was more than I'd see in my entire life. But I looked at Shadow, at his proud stance, at the scars that were slowly healing, at the eyes that looked at me with something I could only describe as hope. "No," I called back. "He belongs to me. Go away." A moment of silence, then deep laughter. "So that's how it's going to be." The crash as they broke down the door was deafening. The table splintered. Wood flew through the air. 3 men stormed in. The auctioneer, a massive thug with a scarred face, and a gaunt man with cold eyes and a net in his hand. "There's the beast!" the thug bellowed. "Catch it!" Shadow lunged at them. I had never seen him fight. I had never known what he was capable of. Now I knew. He was a whirlwind of teeth and claws. His growl filled the chamber, so loud my ears hurt. The thug tried to hit him with a club, but Shadow was faster. His teeth closed around the man's arm, and the scream that followed would haunt me forever. But there were too many. The gaunt man threw the net, and it wrapped around Shadow's hind legs. He stumbled. Fell. "No!" I screamed and rushed forward. Without thinking, I threw myself at the auctioneer. My fingernails scratched across his face. He hit me hard. My head slammed against the wall, and stars exploded before my eyes. I tasted blood. "Stupid girl," he hissed, grabbing me by the hair. "You should have accepted the offer." He raised his hand again. I saw the fist coming, too slow to dodge. And then something happened. Shadow roared, but it was no longer an animal sound. It was something else, deeper, full of power, full of ancient fury. The net simply tore, as if it were made of paper. And then Shadow began to change. His body glowed, a golden light so bright I had to squint. The air crackled with energy, and pressure built that made my ears pop. The men screamed, the auctioneer dropped me and stumbled backward. The light exploded. When it faded, the wolf was gone. In his place stood a man. He was breathtaking. Tall, nearly 2 meters, with broad shoulders and a body that seemed to vibrate with power. His hair was midnight black, falling wild to his shoulders. His face was angular, masculine, with high cheekbones and a sharp jaw, but it was his eyes that held me. The same impossible golden eyes I knew so well. Shadow. Or no, not shadow. Something much greater. He was naked, but it didn't seem to bother him. His body was covered with the same scars I had tended. The whip marks, the brand marks, the cuts. But now, in human form, I saw something else too. Runes, complex magical symbols etched into his skin, glowing faintly in the darkness. A curse, I realized. This had been a curse. "You," the auctioneer stammered, his face chalk white. "No, that can't be. The king is dead. They said he was dead." "King," I whispered. The man, the king, didn't turn to me. His gaze was fixed on the intruders, and what I saw there froze the blood in my veins. Murderous rage. "You dare!" His voice was deep, resonant, full of authority. "Invade my sanctuary. Touch her." "My king, we didn't know." The gaunt man fell to his knees. Silence. A single word, but it echoed like a thunderclap. The runes on his body flared, and the air itself seemed to tremble. "She," he pointed at me without looking, "is under my protection. She freed me when everyone else abandoned me. She fed me, healed me, gave me back my dignity." He took a step toward the men, his muscles tensed like a big cat's before the pounce. "And you come here. You strike her. You make her bleed." His hand shot forward faster than my eyes could follow. He grabbed the auctioneer by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. "No one," his grip tightened, and I heard bones creak, "touches her. Please," the man wheezed. "Mercy." For an endless moment I thought he would kill him. The fury in his eyes was absolute, total. These men had hunted him, tortured him, sold him. They had struck me. They deserved it. But then I heard my own voice, weak and trembling. "Please, not here. Not in my home." His hand froze. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head to me. Our eyes met, and I saw everything. The rage, the pain, the gratitude, the love. He dropped the man. The auctioneer collapsed, coughing. Saliva and blood dripped from his lips. "Go," the king said quietly. Too quietly. "Go before I change my mind. And tell everyone in this city, whoever harms a hair on her head will feel a king's wrath." The men stumbled over each other in their haste to flee. Their footsteps echoed down the stairs, and then they were gone. Silence. I stood there trembling, my hand on the wall to keep from falling. My head throbbed where I'd been struck. My lip was still bleeding. The king turned to me. The rage had left his eyes, replaced by something gentler. "You're bleeding," he said quietly. It's fine." He came closer, each step slow, careful, as if afraid to frighten me. When he stood before me, he raised his hand. His fingers, which had just nearly killed a man, touched my cheek with infinite tenderness. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You, a small, poor girl with no name and no gold. You gave up everything for me. I couldn't leave you there." A sad smile touched his lips. "Do you know who I am?" I shook my head. "My name is Lucian, king of the Northern Realm, or at least I was." His hand fell. "I was betrayed by my own council. They used forbidden magic to force me into that form. The proud king reduced to an animal. They wanted to see me die in the arena. The scars, each one," he nodded, "a memento of their cruelty. But you're free now. The curse is broken. By you." His eyes met mine again. Only true affection could break the spell. Not romantic, though, he hesitated. That could develop too. But something more genuine. "You saw me. Not the monster, not the king, just me. Tears burned in my eyes. What? What happens now? Now? His smile became harder. I take back my kingdom, and the traitors will pay. He sank to one knee before me. The king, on his knees, before me. But first, he said, I thank you, Arya. How do you know my name? You told me. In your stories. I always listened. My heart clenched. I only did what was right. And that's exactly why. He took my hand. You are the only truth in a kingdom full of lies. The next hours were a blur. Lucian wouldn't leave me alone. He found clothing. Somewhere, I didn't ask where. And then he led me from my destroyed chamber. The city was dark and still, but I felt eyes on us. Windows opening and closing again. We went to the city gates. Men were already waiting there. Soldiers in royal colors, who had appeared as if from nowhere. My king! They fell to their knees. You live. I live, Lucian's voice was firm, thanks to this woman. She will be treated with respect. Is that clear? Yes, my king. A horse was brought. Lucian lifted me onto it as if I weighed nothing, then climbed up behind me. His arms encircled me, strong and warm. Hold on, he murmured in my ear. And then we rode through the night, through forests and across fields. The moon illuminated our path, and behind us followed the soldiers, a dark wave of steel and loyalty. When dawn broke, we reached the castle. It was gigantic, towers stabbing into the sky, walls thick enough to withstand armies, gates of pure iron that opened before us as if they had only been waiting for him. We rode through. Everywhere, servants jumped up, their faces a mixture of shock and joy. The king has returned. Lucian dismounted and lifted me down. My knees were weak, and I swayed, but he held me steady. Welcome, he said quietly, to your new home. My home? You didn't think I'd let you go? His smile was crooked. You gave your copper coins for me. In return, I give you a kingdom. But I'm just a seamstress. No. He shook his head. You're the woman who saved a king. You're my protector, my savior. And if you want... He hesitated. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. My queen. The world seemed to stop. I know it's too soon, he continued quickly. I don't expect an answer. I don't expect anything at all. But I want you to stay here, safe, protected. And in time, perhaps we can see what becomes of us. I looked at him. This man who had been a wolf, this king who had slept on my floor, this proud warrior who offered me his heart with trembling hands. I'll stay, I whispered. But not because of the castle, not because of the crown. Why then? I smiled, for the first time in days, a real smile. Because you're still the same. Wolf or king, you're still my shadow. His eyes glowed, and then, gently, carefully, as if I might break, he bowed his head and touched his forehead to mine. Then I belong to you, he whispered. Today, and forever. The traitors were found. Their heads soon decorated the city walls, a cruel reminder of what happens when you challenge a king. But Lucian was not only cruel, he was also just. The innocent were spared, the corrupt were punished, and I became his constant companion, his advisor, his friend. It took months before our love grew from friendship to something deeper. But when it happened, it was natural, inevitable, right. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the day I bought him at the market, he knelt before me again. This time he held a ring in his hand, a simple gold band with a black stone. For the woman, he said, who gave everything. Will you be my queen? I said yes. The wedding was small, intimate, exactly as we wanted it. No grand speeches, no pompous feasts. Just him and me under the open sky, surrounded by a few loyal friends. When he kissed me, I swear I heard a wolf howling in the moonlight. Sometimes, on cold nights, he still transforms. The curse isn't completely broken, only weakened. But I don't mind, because when he's a wolf, he still sleeps by my bed. He still guards me. He still loves me. And I love him, in every form, because I learned that true love doesn't lie in royal titles or glittering crowns. It lies in the small moments, in trust, in sacrifice, in seeing what others overlook. I bought a chained wolf to save him, but in the end he saved me.